With Proxmox 9.1, Proxmox released an update that includes support for OCI images. So what are OCI images? OCI images is an open container format, and it's based on the Docker format. This is a big deal because until now, Proxmox has only supported virtualization and LXC containers. So adding on OCI containers adds more tools to your tool belt. So more ways to run applications. Now, they did release this as a tech preview in Proxmox 9.1, but if you're running Proxmox 9.1, you can run it today, but maybe you shouldn't. I don't know. I'll show you some of the quirks, some of the things that are left undone, and you can make decisions for yourself. This was the announcement from Proxmox 9.1. It says that 9.1 now integrates support for Open Container Initiative, or OCI images, a standard format for a container distribution. Users can now download widely adopted OCI images directly from registries or upload them manually to use as templates for LXC containers. So depending on the image, these containers are provisioned as full system containers or lean application containers. So this is kind of mixing the two, and this is what threw me off just a little bit. So what they're doing is actually creating an LXC container and then putting the OCI container inside of it. I think similar to the way that people were running containers inside of LXC, I think they're doing this the same way, but a little more standard. So what does that look like? So if I go into my brand new Proxmox 9.1.1 server, this is kind of how they work. So initially, what you need to do is actually pull down that container from a registry and store it on this machine. Similar to how you used LXCs with templates, where you need to pull those templates, or in this case, those images down locally so you can use them. So if I go into where I store my container templates, and I go into here, you'll now see this new option that says pull from OCI registry. And so this is going to pull down the container image and store it on this machine. So if I wanted to pull down Grafana, I would use Grafana/Grafana. Now, where am I getting that? Well, that's based on Docker's container registry. And so it's usually organization/application or container image name. And you can find all of those out on the web. If we look at Docker Hub, you can see that this is where it's coming from. And so we have lots of tags here. But at the end of the day, if we wanted to pull it, it's going to be Grafana/Grafana. And I showed that we had tags available there. We can actually query all of those tags and bring those back. So if I query them, here are all of those tags that we saw there. Now, if I wanted to pull down and run a specific version or a specific container image tag of Grafana, I could put it here. But for most people, I think we're going to go with latest and go that route. So if I choose the tag of latest, and I don't need to rename the file, and click download, this should pull down a copy of that container image now onto Proxmox. And then after it's pulled down, we can see right here, Grafana_latest.tar. So that Grafana image is now on my Proxmox server. Here's where things are a little bit different, I guess I should say. If I wanted to create this application and run this application on top of Proxmox, typically with Docker containers, you would say Docker run or Docker compose up, and it would spin up that application within Docker or containerd and run the application that way. But what they've done is actually put those OCI images or those containers inside of an LXC container, making it a little bit, I guess, different is a way to put it. And I'll show you what's different. So what we would do is we would go up to create CT or create container, and I would fill out most of this like normal. And then I could choose my template. And now, instead of choosing a container template, I can actually choose a container image template, an OCI image. So if I choose Grafana there, and I say next, then I can choose some more options for this LXC container, because really that container is going to be running inside of a container, which has its pros and cons. I'll show you. But we can assign, cores to this. You can assign disk space to this. You can assign mount options, all of the typical options you have for LXC containers. I'm just going to give mine 2 cores. 512 meg RAM is good enough for this. Then if I hit next, we're in the networking tab. And so this isn't using Docker networking or container networking. It's actually using LXC container networking. So this is different, but kind of cool, is they're mapping that container image networking to this LXC networking. So you have a lot more flexibility with networking. That was a lot of networking in a short period of time. But the cool thing is I don't need to set up MAC VLAN for this to get an IP address. I don't need to do anything different for it to listen for tags. And it's not going to be listening on the Proxmox server host network itself. It's actually going to be on the bridge network. So different, but kind of cool that I can do this with an OCI image. So let's just say I'm going to choose DHCP. We'll just grab an IP address from DHCP when it starts up, and I'll choose next. I'm not going to set up any DNS servers. I probably should. And then let's finish. Let's create this container. So now it created that LXC container, and we can start this up with a quick start. If we go into our network options, I can see that already pulled an IP address, so it already started. And if I go to that IP address, 192.168.0.215, you can see Grafana is here and running. So pretty cool that we're able to run an OCI image that quickly. Now let's kind of unpeel the layers of this onion and see what's going on. So one thing I asked myself is, okay, well, that's cool. How do we change any environment variables or add environment variables? And it looks like what they've done is put them in options, which I think is a good place for it. And then they have a variable called environment, which if we edit this, you can see all of our different environment variables. So if you're running containers, typically you configure them with environment variables that are exposed. You can change or set those environment variables somewhere. And then when you start the container, it will read those variables and run the container with those settings. So you can see them all here. If I wanted to add a new variable, like if there was Grafana, I don't know, these are some of the defaults, but if there was, user ID, I could set that and set it to, 1000 or something like that. Just making this up. We could look at real environment variables if we wanted to. But that's how you would create and configure environment variables. So pretty cool. I would have to, shut it down and then start it back up to get the new settings. And then we should have them. One thing I noticed here in the console is that you're not getting any feedback. And if you actually Control-C, I think you terminate that container. This all kind of makes sense in the OCI context, but a little bit different in the LXC context. Normally you'd think you could run some command utilities, but that's all abstracted from you. For better or worse, traditional Docker is abstracted from you in an LXC, but then also LXC is kind of abstracted from you when you try to do truly LXC type things. I don't know if that's a pro or con. That's just the way it is now. So one thing I did notice is that there isn't a great way to update containers. When I was looking in the forums, what they do say is, it's kind of painful, for lack of a better term. Keep in mind that it's a tech preview, but you basically need to create separate mount points for your data volumes, and then create new containers and then point those containers at those data volumes. So I think they have a lot of work to do on that front. And honestly, I think they have a lot of work to do in a lot of fronts on this. Like, I do think it is a great idea. I guess my expectation going into it was I thought that I would just be able to say, run image, not in LXC, that it would run on the host. I totally understand why they abstract it and keep it within an LXC. It makes it portable, makes it easy to back up. You're not hosting things, directly on the host. So there are a lot of benefits to running in an LXC. But I think there's a long way to go to get this, kind of production ready. I would love to see the ability to just create a container image without messing with the registries and pulling down that OCI image locally and then referencing that in an LXC. All the things that make Docker pretty easy is I can say Docker run Postgres, and it's going to run Postgres. And I understand we don't have the CLI here and technically not Docker, but I would love to see that, from the UI is me just specify, the container image to use right here. Don't have to pull it down, any tag I want, and hit save and create. And then, if I go back into this container, I would like to be able to say, if this was the version, if I was on 1.1 or 1.0, I could go into here and say, hey, now I want 1.1 and say next. And then that would pull down that container image inside of that LXC. There's a lot of cool things here. I'm super excited that you could finally run container images on Proxmox without doing some container within a container thing and all of that. I'm glad there's an official way to run containers. It has a long way to go, and there's a lot I still think they need to figure out. That aside, I think some people might be asking, well, why even run OCI images at all? Why run Docker images? I could just install the application and run it that way. Well, a lot of application maintainers are shipping their software as containers already, right? And if you think of containers and what they provide an environment for you to run applications without worrying about all of the dependencies. So if you noticed, I can't get into the console here and update this LXC container because I shouldn't have to worry about that. And that's the promise of containers. If I need to run Postgres, and Postgres depends on, Python or all of these dependencies, I don't have to sudo apt install Postgres, worry about the 1,000 dependencies that need to be installed just to get Postgres running. I can pull down that one image with all of the dependencies and run Postgres. Not to mention that because it's a tagged version, it's frozen in time or pinned to a version so that if I run Postgres here or there or anywhere else, as long as it's an OCI container, it will run exactly the same. And so that's kind of the benefits of running OCI images. And I really hope that Proxmox takes this kind of to the next level. I would love to be able to simply spin up OCI images or Docker containers with just a couple of clicks or a couple of typings or however you want to do it. I'd love to see YAML too, but I don't think that's happening. Anyways, that's OCI images on Proxmox and 9.1. I'm super excited for it. What do you think? Do you think it's worth it? Do you like the abstraction? Or would you rather just run a few simple commands, get your containers going, and deal with networking yourself? I don't know. Let me know down in the comments. I'm Tim. Thanks for watching.